And welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. Christian Clemente here, joined by Jason Caldwell here on this Monday night as we're recording it. Should be up for y'all on Tuesday morning. We're here watching Florida State, Boston College a little bit, about ahead to halftime, so it's a good game. But we're here to talk about Auburn recruiting, Jason, because as has been customary under Hugh Freeze, it was a big recruiting weekend. We thought going into the week that there would be a handful of big visitors for the Alabama A&M game, namely Deuce Knight. That was a guy that's been known as a visitor for a couple of weeks leading into the game. But then as the list started to come together towards the end of the week, you got Naim Offord in there. You got Usman Kroma, Elijah Melendez. I mean, C.D. Morgan showed up in the 2026 class. You had a pair of top 10 tight ends in the country, both from Illinois from 2026, show up as well. So you had a pretty solid little list there for Alabama A&M. Obviously, none bigger than Deuce Knight. That is where we will start the conversation on this podcast. Before I get into that real quickly, I'll mention if you're not a subscriber at auburnundercover.com, you can join now for 75% off. That deal goes through end of day Tuesday, I believe. So even if you're listening to this at some point on Tuesday, you can still join and get 75% off. But Jason, Deuce Knight, the name that we've been keeping a very, very close eye on at quarterback really since about the beginning of July. So it's been 2 months now where we've been watching Deuce Knight closely. And now we think that the saga may be coming to a close here relatively soon.
Yeah, feels like there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I think it's been kind of trending that way for a little while. And obviously getting him on campus was a big deal. And he had some family members with him that came to Auburn as well. And not a bad game to be at if you're Deuce Knight too. With you see Cam Coleman with an early touchdown, Malcolm Simmons with a couple, Perry Thompson. They showcase the wide receiver group and throwing the football. That'd be a pretty good spot to be in, I think, if you're a quarterback. And so we talked about it, the selling points for Auburn and having these wide receivers. And in one game you saw, hey, here's the potential of what you could have. Down the road at Auburn with these young guys, and Bryce Kane in there to get involved. Not to mention whoever you get in this class. Or you got Derek Smith, but who else can you add? So, it sure feels like this one's heading towards conclusion, maybe here in the next week or so. And if so, then you start to continue maybe another boost of momentum towards the finish line for this class. And if so, then it might trigger a few more that we can talk about as well.
Yeah, I don't think it was a coincidence. I think Hugh Freeze wanted to air it out on Saturday for a couple of different reasons. I think Deuce being in attendance was a small factor of that. I think he also wanted to work out some kinks in the passing game, make sure that they were comfortable, and also show the fans, look, the things are looking a little bit different. But I do think Deuce being there was a small factor in that, in a sense of saying, look, this is last year. Last year is not the same. It's a different offense. And then, Jason, you mentioned timeline. We're really watching this next weekend closely. He's supposed to have a big rivalry game, high school, on Friday night. And then we think after that, something could potentially happen. I mentioned in the big board already. So if you're already a subscriber at Auburn Undercover, this isn't news to you, but we think Deuce will be back for the Cal game as well. And so definitely would not be a surprise if he showed up to that game committed or was committed by the time toe meets leather on Saturday. So it's something that we will be watching extremely closely on Saturday and Sunday this weekend. Jason, I think from there, probably go to Naim Offord. I mean, we could easily go Elijah Melendez or Usman Kroma. There's a ton of different storylines. Naim Offord, look, we've known him a long time, not the most vocal or outgoing in interviews, but him being there kind of tells the story as Auburn continues to chip away at his Ohio State commitment.
Yeah, I think that's the story for a lot of these guys. I mean, it was Alabama A&M. It's the first of 5 straight weeks for Auburn. There's going to be lots of opportunities for guys to come to Auburn. And these guys chose to come week 1 and said, hey, we want to be there. I think that's a big deal. And so you look at Naim Offord, and we talked about this last week. We've talked about it several times, but it's felt like this one has taken a pretty steady progression since the spring, starting with, official visit, then Big Cat, and now being back, last Saturday. It feels like it's taken a steady progression, and all of it feels like it's in Auburn's favor. Will it be enough to get over the finish line? It feels like it's going to be. When that is, I don't know, but it sure feels like that Naim Offord's a guy that's trending more towards Auburn than maybe we pictured even just a couple of weeks ago, but definitely a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it, and we talked about it on the pregame blitz there on Saturday morning. The video series that we do before every single home game down there on the field. So definitely encourage y'all to check that out if you're not already. But I mentioned it. I said that quarterback and what Auburn does there with Deuce Knight is something that could play a factor for Naim Offord. And Jason, the question that people probably have is, well, he's a cornerback. Well, why would he care what a quarterback is going to do? Jason, what would be kind of your take on that, and why getting Deuce Knight could play a factor towards getting a really elite guy like Naim Offord?
I think quarterback matters for everybody on the team because that position, how important it is. And if you don't think so, just watch Florida State, this game we're watching. You feel like, hey, DJ's been the guy now at 3 schools. Hey, we got our quarterback. And to this point, he hasn't been that guy at any school. Now, he could turn it on, and he may wind up being the guy at Florida State. But if you feel like you got your guy in your class and it's a guy, hey, I've seen this guy, I know who he is, it always makes a difference. It really does, even for defensive players, because in the end, guys, they want to go win and compete for championships, and it takes everywhere. That's why you can get 4 elite wide receivers in one class. It doesn't seem normal when you think about the human psyche, because normally you're like, I want to be the guy in my class. But if you're competing for championships and it's team first, then you want as many good guys as you can get. We've seen it, DeMarcus Riddick and those guys in last year's class, and Malik Autry and Alvin Henderson, a bunch of guys, Ryan G in this class going, hey, bring more guys in. Ryan G is recruiting other tight ends. That tells you it's, hey, this could be as good as we can be. Well, that includes defensive guys wanting offensive guys and offensive guys wanting defensive guys. And so it all factors in when you're talking about what the end game is, which was winning a national championship.
Yeah. I hate to leave Usman Kroma last because there was a lot of good things coming out of his interview and talking with him, and a new crystal ball pick there as well. I should mention, actually, before we move on, that our Tom Lloyd put in a crystal ball pick for Auburn to flip Naim Offord. He did that Saturday morning before Offord was ever on campus or anything like that. Mentioned it on the pregame blitz. We're not quite to that point just yet, but we don't disagree where Tom is going with it either. We think that Auburn sits in a pretty good spot there. But let's talk about Elijah Melendez, because that was the storyline kind of Saturday morning, because he shows up to campus, flies in obviously from Florida, and drives over from Atlanta to Auburn's campus. He shows up and he's on campus for no more than an hour or two, and he decommits from Miami and backs off that commitment. Connect the dots there. Everyone that's listening is hopefully smart enough to put the puzzle together there. Jason, we feel like Auburn sits in a very good spot, and we think that news could come with him within the next couple of weeks or so, in terms of potential potential new commitment, and we think Auburn is the team to beat there.
Yeah, and a guy that could really see his stock skyrocket coming off an injury and finally healthy and playing, and his early season highlights are really impressive. It's a big physical specimen at linebacker, and so you look at a guy like that, he's a guy that could really climb the rest of this year in terms of rankings. But no question that this is a guy that you start talking about, classic big body linebacker. He's a guy that could probably weigh 235 or 240 on the next level and carry it really easily. But yeah, you watch him and kind of see him walking around Saturday, and it looked like a guy who was having a lot of fun, and it looked like a guy who, yeah, I would guess already knows where he wants to go. Well, just a matter of when that were to happen.
And he also looked like a grown man.
Yes, he does. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he's listed at 6'2", 225, somewhere in there.
Yeah, as I said, he could easily be 235, 240 without a problem on the next level.
Yeah, and so, the natural kind of question there is, okay, well, what happens at the linebacker board then? Because, look, you've got J.J. Falk committed. You've got him committed as a linebacker. I feel like everybody thinks eventually he turns into a buck linebacker and is more kind of rushing the passer than he is dropping into coverage. But you have him committed at linebacker, so that's technically his position of future right now. Bryce Diaz is a guy that recruited as a defensive athlete, basically. They said, look, you're either going to play linebacker or safety. We don't know what quite yet, but we know we like you enough to take your commitment. We all kind of lean towards linebacker a little bit just with the natural size that he has there. But he could end up at safety. And if you get Melendez, theoretically, that puts you at 3 commitments. Obviously, we've been tracking Tyler Lockhart quite a bit, and we still think that Auburn is squarely in the mix there. I don't think a commitment from Elijah Melendez, if Auburn were to get it, would change things, at least from Auburn's perspective, on Tyler Lockhart. Now, it might change things for Tyler Lockhart. There's no telling that because we haven't gotten his take on things, but we know that Auburn would like to get him in linebacker. Look, you're losing Eugene Asante. Austin Keys, I think, has one more year, but the odds that he uses that is probably pretty low, if I had to guess. Dorian Mausi, he'll be out of eligibility. The Maryland transfer you brought in is just a 1-year guy.
Yep.
So you'll be left with Woodyard and then the kids that you just brought in, DeMarcus Riddick and DJ Barber. So you need to load up at linebacker this class.
Yeah, no, there's going to be room. I think, yeah, you're right. I don't think it changes Auburn's linebacker board at all. I think you're talking about, probably at least 3 guys in this class at linebacker. And you're right. I'm not really sure where everybody fits, because you have a guy that could easily put his hand on the ground, and you have a guy that could easily probably be a safety or kind of a player on the next level. So I think if we've learned anything, it's that take as many guys as you feel like are really good football players and then figure out where they play. And I think that's what they're going to do. Hey, if you feel like this is one of the best football players you can get in this class, you sign him and then figure out where he plays. That I think it's much easier to do that than it is to go, hey, let's go sign a guy at this position. Well, what if this other guy's better? Well, we need this guy. Well, maybe somebody else can play that position and you can get a better player. I think that's always the right bet, and it's something that I think Auburn has gotten back to now. Something they did a good job of during the Tuberville years, especially of, hey, let's go out and sign a bunch of guys that we feel like are really good football players, then figure it out. And I think they're doing that right now.
Speaking of really good football players, I mean, Auburn is still in search of a second running back. In the class, we thought that it's always been Usman Kroma or Shai Mills-Knight. Shai Mills-Knight commits to Ole Miss a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago or something like that. And then since then, all eyes have been on Usman Kroma. Look, there's been movement back and forth a lot of different ways over the past couple of months here. Florida State getting buzz at times, Georgia getting buzz at times, Auburn getting buzz at times. Now, as he's a couple weeks away from making a decision, Jason, he didn't say who, but he said on Saturday that one team has started to separate themselves a little bit. And we get the feeling that that's Auburn. Now, look, you still need to weather the storm moving forward, because he's going to Georgia next weekend for their game against, I think, Tennessee Tech. And then the weekend after that, he's going to go see South Carolina. They've not really even been involved too much with him, so that's not a school I'm overly concerned about. And then from there, he kind of wants to have a decision. Auburn would like to get him back on campus after those 2 visits, but I don't know how feasible that will end up being. So right now, we think that Auburn has the lead, and it's kind of hold on through the next couple weeks here.
Yeah, and I think you look at need, and I think you go, man, Auburn, you look at the need at running back, and you got to feel like that's something that does maybe push Auburn a little bit more than some other schools when you think about them. And they're obviously bringing in Alvin Henderson, but didn't bring in a running back last year. You got, Jarquez Hunter, who'll be gone after this season. We'll see about Damari Austin. He'll have another year if he wants it, but there's still only a couple of running backs on campus. And so you start to talk about depth, playing time, competition, the ability to kind of go in there and kind of earn a spot. I mean, I think Auburn for a running back is about as good as it gets right now. And so I think that's something that could really play in Auburn's favor. And so once again, you look at guys that kind of fit it. And Usman Kroma, every time we've kind of been around him, kind of has that feel. When we saw him in Tiger Walk before the game Saturday, and you could see a guy that was like, he's kind of taking it all in. And so, would I be shocked if he, wound up somewhere? Probably, but I would say, it wouldn't surprise me to see him end up somewhere. But I feel like Auburn's in a pretty good spot right now.
Yeah, and this is another one. It goes back to exactly what we were talking about earlier, guys recruiting other guys. He said Alvin Henderson was talking to him like the entire visit, was like, look, what's it going to take? When are we getting you in the class? And that's a guy, you're getting one running back on the field at the same time or at once. You're not going to get multiple, very rarely, except for a couple of packages. That is a position, one guy's on the field at a time. That's it. But Alvin Henderson is working on Usman Kroma really hard because they know, look, need to have multiple running backs, and running back, like you mentioned, is a position that is down some scholarships a little bit, so you definitely need to replenish that room a little bit. Jason, there's more names that we could touch on. We kind of want to make this more of a quick recap show to talk about this past weekend. CD Morgan is one that is worth mentioning. Like I said earlier in the show, that he was there. Auburn continues to make a really big move with him, the number 7 player in the country in the 2026 class. Looking ahead, we'll probably try and get some recruiting talk in, and maybe one of the shows we do later this week at some point. Not sure when that will be. We'll kind of figure that out. But Sam Turner, the Georgia Tech commit, is locked in for a visit to go see Auburn this weekend for the Cal game. Unofficial visit. He'll be back for the Oklahoma game for his official visit. Like I mentioned, wouldn't be a surprise at all if Deuce Knight is there. Expect almost all of the commitments there that were there on Saturday. I mean, you had almost all of them. Expect those guys to be back. Plus, guys like Tavares Dice and Malik Autry both went to go see Florida get waxed by Miami. They'll be in Auburn on Saturday as well for the game against Cal. So it should be a good showing. Alabama plays USF and Georgia plays Tennessee Tech. So if you're Auburn, the two biggest rivals and the two biggest kind of region schools around you, you've definitely got the biggest game. So you've got the biggest opportunity to get guys in this weekend. So it should be a pretty productive weekend for Auburn, I would think.
Yeah. And we've seen anything. This staff gets guys on campus and they give them for games, and this is going to be an opportunity. I think you look and you go, more than likely another big weekend this weekend, probably not as big for New Mexico, and then you have a couple of more weeks with Arkansas and Oklahoma, obviously. So you got, hey, come back again, take a break for a week, and then come back for 2 more weeks. I think we're going to see kind of that trend, maybe a lot of young guys from New Mexico, where you see a lot of 26, 27 type guys in for that game. But yeah, this one I think will be another good weekend on Saturday.
Yeah, so it should be a fun one. I think we'll wrap things up there, Jason, if that's good with you. And we will see you guys. I know Nathan has a podcast with CJ Anderson, a former Cal player, coming out later this week. We'll have the usual roundtable, stuff like that. Fridays with Phillips. Look, it's season time, so y'all are getting a podcast. Should be almost every single day of the week, to be honest, because there will be stuff on Saturday. There will be stuff after the game for stuff on Sunday as well. So there is no shortage of podcast content if that's something that you like. And of course, for our subscribers over at auburnundercover.com, plenty of coverage over there. We'll have the full recruiting weekend covered over there, potential commitments covered over there as well. Like I said, if you're not a subscriber, you can join us now for 75% off an annual sub. I think it's less than like $27 for the year. You will get your money's worth within the first couple of weeks. That's a Christian Clemente guarantee right there. If you don't like it, just shoot me a message and I'll tell you that you're wrong or something like that. But anyways, we're going to wrap things up there. Appreciate everyone tuning in, and we will catch you guys